We have Commissioner Sankey, and he will open with some remarks.
Yeah, I'll be really fast here, but first, let's go to airplane mode. There you go. I assume all of you have access to social media, and we piped in my remarks, so there's no need for me to say the same thing again so that you can ask me about what I said again. You can just ask me what I said the first time. So good to be here. Thank you for being part of SEC Media Days in 2022, and the floor is yours.
To your left, Coach, second row.
Commissioner, you'd mentioned earlier on in your when you were being questioned earlier on today about how you feel good about 16, but you're not exactly closing the door yet on if a right team comes around. I was wondering, what are the type of qualities for another college that would be able to join the SEC? What are the qualities that you look for a team that could join?
Well, they'd have to be interested, so we'd start there. They also have to be unencumbered, if you will. We're not focused on immediate movement, really focused on the move from 14 to 16 as we add two really successful athletics programs and prominent universities. And when we added those two, the fact that they're in contiguous states, one in a contiguous state, one in a state where we have a member, allows us to conduct competition. It I think magnifies fan interest in who we are. And those sorts of characteristics of high-level athletics with quality academic institutions would be on our mind. But again, it's not something we're poised to jump into just because others are engaged in that activity. We think we made an informed and wise decision a year ago, and I think it looks particularly wise given what's happening now.
To your left, fourth row.
Just keep on this horse here. You've mentioned contiguous a number of times. How important is that to you? Not maybe not necessarily for the football, but for the other sports that obviously are in the conference.
With the understanding it's not on the first, second, or third level of our meeting agendas, so we're not at a fourth level issue. It's going to be a part of the conversation should we ever expand. We added Missouri, new state, contiguous. We added Texas A&M, adjacent to our current footprint. Oklahoma, adjacent to our current footprint. So that's a pretty good tell should we ever end up in that discussion in a real way.
The front row here.
E.P. Stidham, WGP, Foley, Alabama. Commissioner, what is your confidence level that there'll be uniformity with the NIL at some point?
Not overly confident. To do that is going to take an act of Congress, which used to be a joke. Now it's a reality, right? Like that was the thing that people would say when you couldn't get things done at home. It's going to take an act of Congress. I do think a national standard is important, and a national standard would support interconference play during the regular season, like we're going to have here in Atlanta when Oregon and Georgia play, or later that same night, Utah's traveling to Florida to play in Gainesville. It also supports national championships, so the ability to have a Final Four, the ability to have a College World Series, the ability to have a college football playoff is predicated on some basis for national competition. And there are variances, there will be variances, but it emphasizes the importance. I also look through the list of realities. I think it's enormously difficult for young people to understand what they're getting into right now. So as I hear the reports from young people in the recruiting space, I don't hear a lot directly, hear a lot indirectly. Who's helping advise them? Who's helping young people understand when they sign an agreement around something called name, image, and likeness that it's not entangling them in a set of problems to come? Who's to say that the company involved or the individual involved has the right backing, the right financial backing, the right legal structure, the right credentials to be actually in this business? We don't know. And so while I'm not overly confident that we can get this done, I think the need's real.
To your right, the fourth row.
Brandon Adams from Dog Nation. The SEC is going to undergo a lot of changes in future years. Going to add 2 more members. Schedule's going to change. Some rivalries may be done away with. What do you say to fans that are concerned that it might be changing in such a way that it makes the sport or the league they've loved kind of unrecognizable, or at least very, very different looking in future years?
I don't think that's our reality at all. I think we'll be fully recognizable. And in fact, the question about who we add and how we think about who we add, one of our athletics directors said they meet the "it just means more" test, and their fan base is committed. They play at a high level. People understand the importance of competing and being victorious, or if you lose, how you adjust. That will happen across our 16 members, I think, in every sport. Rivalries won't go away in our new scheduling model. Rivalries may be played on a different pace. So some rivalries that have been played less frequently because people happen to be in different divisions may play more frequently. Rivalry games that may be annually may be every other year. So the rivalries won't go away. The rivalries will be front and center. A lot of that, whether it's annual or every other year, will depend on which model we pick. The ability to protect more annual rivalry games is there in a three-team kind of 9-game model. So that's front and center, but we need to think through the implications of that model. So I would say to our fans, we're going to look exactly the same. Maybe it'll be a little bit different uniform. You're going to see some of the uniforms you know, but you don't see but once a decade, more frequently in football. And we'll continue to rotate people through on a regular basis so you can engage in the emotional outbursts, good or bad, in every sport we have.
To your left in the back row.
Yes, sir. Ed Daniels, WGNO New Orleans. I apologize if you answered this previously in the over the Hall of Fame, but is there a couple of questions? Is there a chance that the schedule for Oklahoma and Texas joining the league moves up? How big a mountain would that be to move? And also, does the East and West go away? Do we have 14 pods? How do you envision the future, what that looks like when those two teams eventually come on board?
We'll create a common social understanding. You don't have to apologize for asking a question that's been asked before, because this is day one. I have 3 more days, so we're early in answering the same question. First, the timing of entry. So we've announced July 1st, 2025. The reasons for that are around the contractual relationships between the University of Oklahoma and the University of Texas with the Big 12. And that's a grant of rights, membership agreements, notice provisions that they have. And we're not going to make decisions about those elements. That's between the two universities and their current conference. And so that has us focused on July 2025 because those agreements end June 30, 2025. If something changes, we'll adapt, but that's not for me to decide. On the timing of when, remember, we announced the addition of Texas A&M in early mid-September of 2011 to go to 13. So we were preparing for, a month and a half, a 13-team schedule in 2011 to be used in 2012. And that's a particular math problem, by the way. And then Missouri's entrance was announced in early November of 2011. And so we had from November to September, basically 10 months. And you need to know those schedules sooner rather than later to actually go through the scheduling exercise. I don't want to go through a 10-month notice. What we anticipate is a respectful and orderly transition focused on 2025. If we need to adapt, we'll work through that. That's not at the forefront of our planning right now, though.
Any other questions for Commissioner Sankey?
Oh, yeah, the exact model. We're focused on a single division model. That doesn't mean we're going to have a single division model. We could still adapt and say 2 divisions works. We've really worked away from the pods. We went through, forgive me, because I've done so much modeling between the playoff and different sports. I think we had the high 30s around different numbers of scheduling models, single division models, 2 division models like we have traditionally, and then podding models. But if you're going to move the pods around, you create real inequities or imbalance between home and away. Like you could go home and then away to the same program. And I get emails. I was not the commissioner when we expanded in 2012 and sent some teams back 2 years in a row. I still receive emails complaining about that. So it didn't seem an effective way to balance. We had some better options. So pods is not at the forefront of our consideration.
Two
which
final
is
questions.
a 14 pod model, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. To the left.
Earlier in the big room, you talked about the strength of the conference and feeling like it's never been stronger, and I think that's, broad pictures. But as the football goes, only 2 new coaches this year, and the SEC West could be one of the best divisions, that we've seen in a long time. I guess just could you speak to the parity of the other teams kind of raising their games to match the level that we're seeing now?
Sure. And this morning I was, I almost started to say welcoming 4 new coaches, and fortunately in a private setting I was reminded it's only 2. So we have 4 coaches who were here in 2019 and 10 new since 2019. And if you go back to the coaches who were in position when I became commissioner, you have Nick Saban and Mark Stoops from 2015. So it's an enormous amount of change. And I think that's an indication that people want to perform at the highest level, and they all have high expectations for their football team's performance. They all have high expectations. I think you heard Brian right off the top of his comments this afternoon talking about and wanting to be in this environment and going to play at Kyle Field and at Jordan-Hare, places where he's never led a team into competition. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. You put things at risk, right, whenever you engage in athletics competition. That's part of the excitement and the emotion that comes. And I'm really proud of the people who've chosen to be a part of it. I think that's part of the excitement. I've not evaluated the talent. So one of the things I don't do on a regular basis is try to predict who's where. Probably a dozen times today I've been told the SEC West is going to be incredible competition. And it really has been for a period of time. And I think what you see is what we saw in women's basketball with Pat Summitt leading the Lady Vols, is that makes everybody better. When Skip Burtman took over baseball at LSU, that made everybody better. What you've seen with Nick in football over the last decade plus, I think that's helped make everybody better. And we've now had 3 different teams in 3 years win the national championship. Nobody else has come close to that. And we did it from 2007 to 2010 with different coaches but the same high expectations. It speaks to the depth of support. In some of the non-conference phone calls I've had in the last few weeks, one person observed, you've got a set of schools who can say, we want to compete at that level and we're prepared to support that effort across the board. And I mean sports beyond football. And that's part of what makes this competition so special. And I truly think it attracts young people who want to play in this environment, and it attracts some older people who want to coach and lead in this environment, because that's where you challenge yourself in the greatest way. That's not a great media TV answer. There's a lot there, but I mean, that's the passion of what we see play out in the decision making for people that come here and make an effort.
Final question, front row.
Commissioner, what are some of the parameters or changes you'd like to see with the transfer rule?
We'll see that, and I'll be happy to go to the back row too, since he
Okay,
got
all
faked
right.
out, but I appreciate the brevity. We'll see in August, the Division I Board of Directors has in front of it some recommendations on transfer windows that are sport specific, an emphasis on academic eligibility, reducing the notion of waivers being out there, accountability for a receiving institution to facilitate that transfer to and through graduation, or be held accountable for their scholarship. I view those changes as a start, and I think it's a better circumstance than we have right now. And I think people could evaluate and say, well, this isn't great. I think it's good, and so we're going to not let great be the enemy of good, to borrow that cliche, and make a step. I do anticipate a need for continuing review of the transfer environment. The open-ended nature of it right now doesn't have a lot of data supporting what's actually happening. You know, we had COVID, then we had COVID eligibility extension, so there's more people in the system. And in the middle of that, we had name, image, and likeness as an onset around more transfer for flexibility. So we've got a lot to learn. What I don't believe will happen, and I don't think it should, is that we have 5 sports that have different rules than the other 25 or 30 sports under the NCAA heading, that will have a consistent approach. If we were to go back to a one-time transfer exception, I think we need to narrow the waiver opportunities, but that's not the focus right now. We need to monitor academic performance. We've seen great national progress in graduation, and if that's diminished, we are an educational enterprise. We're going to have to pivot off of that information. So those opportunities are there. I think the first step that could be taken is a healthy one. The Transformation Committee's been involved in that dialogue, and we'll see if the board agrees. The council, Division I council meets this week, so I'm sure there'll be input there as well.
Commissioner, thank you for taking my question. Dan Peck, ESPN 1067. I saw Coach Kiffin signing golf balls earlier, and I'd like your memories or your reaction in the moment as the Ole Miss-Tennessee situation unfolded last year, and has the conference reevaluated safety protocols or the rules when regarding when a team can leave the field of play when something like that is happening?
We'll go back to discussion of some sportsmanship elements in mid-August with our athletics directors. The reality is that's an anomaly in our experience, so let's not overreact, but let's not underreact. At the time, I gave a lot of credit to Chancellor Plowman and Danny White for their reaction. They're very specific about holding individuals accountable. My real-world reaction is that's not what we want. That's not who we are. There are questions about the conferences pulling back and allowing institutions to make decisions about alcohol sales. Has that had an impact? We also came back last year after a year away. I think there are a lot of factors, and a small number of people in any of our settings can create problematic circumstances. We had one in basketball in Oxford. We had a smaller, one individual in Athens. So we've had some of these misbehavior issues, and they're always a topic of conversation. We've not talked about teams on the field. The focus is going to be to finish the games, and I think rightly so. But any of those incidents are major points of concern for us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep, thank you.